Thanks to everybody for joining us, and welcome to our call to support the efforts of Fukushima Fallout Awareness Network, protecting our food supply from radioactivity. I'm your host, Beth Brangan, co-director of EON, the Ecological Options Network. I'm an award-winning filmmaker, and I've produced many documentaries that have been broadcast nationally and internationally, screened in Congress and at the UN, and used in parliaments and libraries and by activists across the world. I've served as the first statewide coordinator of the movement that successfully blocked a radioactive waste dump here in California, and have been involved over the last 3 decades in many successful campaigns dealing with nuclear issues. We have, believe it or not, 75 videos on our Nuclear Free Planet playlist on YouTube. And you can look for our channel at youtube.com/eon3. Today's call will be divided into 3 parts. Part 1 will be comments by Cindy Folkers. Part 2 will be questions and answers with you, our callers. And Part 3 will be a special message from Kimberly Roberson, the director of Fukushima Fallout Awareness Network.
So before I introduce Kim and Cindy, I just want to give an introduction. Most people think that the Fukushima nuclear disaster of triple meltdowns and multiple explosions happened in Japan in March 2011 and that it's all over now because the media isn't covering it anymore. But the nuclear industry knows better, and it's trying to hide the facts so it can continue operating. Just recently, the EPA has authorized raising the allowable contamination levels so high that now 1 in 23 would likely get cancer from the exposure that will be permitted. Here in California, the UC Berkeley School of Nuclear Engineering, after Fukushima, measured elevated radiation in San Francisco Bay Area samples of water, milk, topsoil, berries, and vegetables. Other researchers have measured elevated radiation levels in California kelp and bluefin tuna off our shores. And in Japan, laboratories measured elevated levels of California food samples in their stores. Almonds, pistachios, oranges, and a grapefruit from Florida were found to have elevated levels of cesium. So not only are we getting our food contaminated from Fukushima, but all of our 102 operating nuclear reactor plants routinely release radiation into both air and water. So this is why we formed Fukushima Fallout Awareness Network, and why Kimberly rallied to the emergency and started it off. And I will introduce her now, although Kim is going to be speaking at the end of the call. But Kim Roberson is a certified diet counselor and nutrition educator and has served on the board of the National Association of Nutrition Professionals. She's worked at Sane Freeze, CalPERG, and Greenpeace, as well as with our EON team, and lobbied for environmental and natural health issues on the state and federal level and at the Food and Drug Administration. Kimberly is the founder of Fukushima Fallout Awareness Network and the author of Silence Deafening, Fukushima Fallout, A Mother's Response. And now I'll introduce Cindy. Cindy Folkers has been with Beyond Nuclear since 2007, focusing on ionizing radiation and its impact on health and the environment. From 1994 until 2007, she served as the radiation and health specialist at Nuclear Information and Resource Services. Cindy communicates with media, members of the public, U.S. Congress, and national and international agencies on radiation and health regulation and science. She's traveled and spoken at public meetings, conferences, and academic symposia, including Helen Caldicott's recent symposium on medical and environmental effects of Fukushima just last month. So welcome, Cindy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary Beth.
And I was hoping that you could provide us with the overview of the FDA petition and what we've done with it.
Sure. So I'm going to give a little bit of background. It first came to my attention in September 2011, which was about 6 months after Fukushima exploded and melted down. And it's still going on, by the way. They're still releasing cesium from Fukushima as far as we can tell. It was in September 2011 that I realized, after searching, that the FDA limit, and it's not even a binding limit, for cesium in our food is 1,200 becquerels per kilogram. Now, this is 12 times higher than Japan's current limit, which is 100 becquerels per kilogram. And the important thing to understand about that is that 100 becquerels per kilogram in Japan of cesium, if they had had material contaminated to that level, it would have required special handling and special disposal and special monitoring before the Fukushima accident. Now it's okay with that 100 becquerels per kilogram to eat it. So the point that I really want to focus in on is that we need standards in our food with a contamination level of cesium that are consistent both during emergencies and after emergencies. So there can't be two different standards. It's got to all be the same standard because obviously Fukushima is still spewing out radiation and obviously it's still contaminated. Yeah. So what exactly does that mean for nuclear and the word emergency, right? When does the accident actually end? I would argue that once you've released this material, the accident is still ongoing for as long as the material is in our environment and irradiating us, and therefore the standard needs to be exactly the same as if you had no accident, no emergency. So what we did was we petitioned the FDA. We filed it in early March. I think it was March 12th of this year, asking for our limit in our food to be 5 becquerels per kilogram of cesium-134 and or 137, so any combination of those two kinds of radioactive cesium. And we did that for because that's the limit at which studies in Belarus show that there is less potential damage to children from that particular level of cesium contamination. When you start to get to about 11 becquerels per kilogram of cesium contamination in food, children start to be adversely affected. And when you start getting to about 50 becquerels per kilogram, and becquerel is a measurement of radioactivity, when you start getting to about 50 becquerels per kilogram of cesium, you start to see permanent tissue damage, heart problems, et cetera, et cetera. So you really start seeing damage at about 11, and you start seeing permanent damage at about 50 becquerels per kilogram. So that's where we came up with the 5. And it just so happens that after we had filed this petition with the FDA, we also saw a report from Germany, from a physicians group in Germany called International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. I'm sure some of you know them, IPPNW. And they say 4 becquerels per kilogram of cesium-134 and 4 becquerels per kilogram of cesium-137. So they're about a total of 8 becquerels per kilogram. We're asking for 5, and really we're very much on par with them. And they derived their number in a different way scientifically. So the fact that our number and their number come together in so close a fashion is very, very it's very, very good, and it's very justified what we're asking the FDA for. And that is what IPPNW is asking the European Union for. Now, their levels are about 300 and 600, depending on whether you're looking at adults or children. The thing to remember is that with Japan's limit being 100 becquerels per kilogram, anything that's over that could get exported to the U.S. or Europe or any other country whose limit is higher, so that we would be eating their contaminated food. And in fact, some of these agencies at the international level that try and recommend radiation exposure for human beings, what levels are safer, what levels are not safe. Those bodies actually, this is a ploy of theirs to get people in quote-unquote non-contaminated areas to eat contaminated food from areas that have experienced nuclear accidents like Fukushima or Chernobyl. So the reason that we filed the FDA petition is to try and get the FDA to lower. We also want constant food monitoring widespread across the country so that we know where cesium contamination is in our food. And because cesium tends to move around in the environment and collect in certain types of food, it'd be really good to get a handle on where the contamination is now and where it's going to be in the future and where it travels. So we would be asking for a low limit of 5 becquerels per kilogram. We're asking for widespread food testing, and we are asking that the FDA maintain a database so that researchers can use that database to help their research in cesium contamination in the environment and so that they can track it.
Thank you, Cindy. And could you say something about the citizen sign-on petition, too?
Absolutely. So there are 2 ways that people can get involved with this right now, and there are actually many more, which Kim will talk about. But for this, I'm going to talk about 2 ways. One, if you feel you have more expertise or your community has gone through and you have more specifics that you'd like to address directly to the FDA, you can go to the FDA website where our petition is filed, and you can make comments directly there to the Food and Drug Administration. In addition, you can also sign our citizens petition, which is a sign-on petition, signon.org, and go there and sign your name to that if you haven't done it already, to send it to FDA Commissioner, I think her name is Margaret Hamburg, President Obama, and then it'll go also to whoever your senator or Congress people are at the federal level. And we have all of those links. I'm sure Kim will point you to the FFAN website, which has the links. Beyond Nuclear has the links on its website as well. And if you get our Beyond Nuclear bulletin, this information has been in there.
This is Kim Roberson. One easy way, too, to find both of these petitions is through the signon.org petition, which we have posted at the FFAN Facebook page, various Facebook pages within our community. When you go to fan.us, that's FFAN.us, you click on Take Action, and you will see the signon.org petition. Within the language of the petition, it's very short. It's just 2 paragraphs. You will see the link to the FDA petition. So that way you don't have to go to 2 different places. You just go right to the sign-on, sign that one, and then you'll see the FDA petition linked within. And that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Kim.
Okay, so now we can open this up to questions. And who
I just asked.
Okay.
I wanted to address specifically the fact that the EPA has recently announced higher allowance for radiation. And was that food and water or just water? I'm driving now. I'm sorry I don't have access to computer or records or anything. But I was alarmed at what the EPA did in the increase. And also the fact that I have read reports that some of the contaminated food from Japan is already entering the U.S.
That EPA petition actually, they say, I have read that they have issued it, or it's taking place immediately. Right now, it's authorized to go into effect, even though they say they're taking public comments. But there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different aspects to it, and it's terrible. It's totally terrible, and I won't go into all of them, but it would allow radioactive waste to be put into regular municipal garbage dumps, for one thing, and that would get into the water. So it's also saying that if the permitted level of radioactivity that heretofore would have been considered that they would have to go in and clean it up. They don't have to at this point. So they're allowing the air contamination from accidents at these aging nuclear reactors. I think they're anticipating that. That's why they wanted to raise the levels, as well as having Fukushima fallout everywhere. Go ahead, Cindy.
Sure. So there's a couple of points here. Well, the first point is that when that EPA official made the comment that he did about, and I'm sure you've all heard it now, people just have to put their big boy pants on and suck it up, which is almost word for word, if not word for word, what this person from the EPA said who's supposed to be involved with cleanups like this.
Well, that person needs to be in porta potties.
Well, yeah, right. But here's my point about that. Basically, what they're saying by what he said and by what EPA is doing with the 1 in 23, but that's only for 30 years. So really, if it's a 70-year lifespan, it's actually 1 in 6. Okay, cancer incidents. So we have to go from that point. And what they're basically saying with their actions and their words is that we're not going to clean anything up. Okay, that's basically what they're saying. We're not going to clean it up. We're not going to move people off the land. They're going to have to stay there because they won't be able to sell it. They're going to have to eat contaminated food and like it, right? So if they're not going to be willing to clean it up, then we have to shut them down. It's a matter of self-defense at this point. And that's actually what I've been telling people, because it's very clear what EPA's stance is. They will not clean up. Right, and they wanted to hide the 1 in 23 over 30 years cancer incidents, 30 years of exposure, and they wanted to hide the 1 in 6 over 70 years of exposure. So they're not being forthright with the public. And as a matter of self-defense, we have to shut this industry down before it does anything. Now, one of the ways that I think we can best go through these channels is through the FDA process, and here is why, right? If you're living in a contaminated environment, but you still are getting uncontaminated food or very slightly contaminated food, like the 5 becquerels that we're asking for of cesium, then you still have a chance, and there is still a way that you can at least have part of what you're taking into your body be clean. But if the food is contaminated, then you have, you're fighting a complete uphill battle, especially for kids. So if you want to start really tackling what they're doing, you make the food supply measurably safer at 5 becquerels per kilogram. And again, that's not perfect. We would want it to go down lower than 5 becquerels per kilogram once we had the equipment that could test it, et cetera, et cetera. So we have that clause built into our FDA petition language. So 5 becquerels is not the floor on this. But if you keep the food supply relatively contamination-free, then you have a leverage point, right? You have, not only are you trying to keep the public safe, but you're also addressing an economic issue, which is food needs to be cleaner, and we need to go through the process of making that happen, right? So at least there would be some protection. But as a general principle, with what EPA is doing, we have to protect ourselves and just try and shut this industry down, because they're not going to clean up.
Yeah, can I break in very briefly?
Yeah.
Are the food inspectors routinely checking? I've never seen a food inspector with a Geiger counter.
No, they don't, and they won't. Because the kind of equipment, first of all, the kind of equipment that they would need to do this, they don't know. That's exactly the point of why we put this petition out there, right? The kind of equipment that they would have to use is quite specialized, and it is more than just a handheld instrument. And so it would take a structure, it would take a network, and it would take people who know what they're doing. And once it's established, it's I'm not going to say it's easy to use, but once it's established, it is very usable and it is very sort of modular, right? But we have to work on that, because at this point FDA is doing the minimal amount, if any, if not even, enough to protect us. Certainly not enough to protect us.
So where do we get the clout to? And this has to happen very quickly. This is not something we can fight this through the system, one hearing after the other over years' time. Can we declare some kind of emergency? Can we elevate this to beyond just a simple food testing issue and then make this a national emergency?
Well, that's an interesting thought. Let's keep that in mind for actions at the end of the call. I appreciate that. Really, that's a good idea. I think that it's unlikely that in the current climate of the rollback of protections at the federal level, and they're doing the same thing in Japan, and I'm sure it's a united decision by the international nuclear industry. They don't want anybody to know what's going on, so how likely is it that they will be willing to do that kind of testing? So I think we have to take a two-pronged approach, and the other prong being citizens getting involved in actual testing.
Right, and we are looking into that, but we do have to do our due diligence in that we need to understand what testing equipment is available, who we're paying for the testing equipment, because we don't want to feed into the monster that is also at the other end contaminating us. So we have looked into this, and we are in the process of trying to work out what individual communities or grocery stores or citizens can try and do. So we are currently looking into that, yeah.
Are there any other questions, ideas, comments?
Hi, it's Laura Lynch in Santa Barbara.
Thank you, Laura.
And I just want to thank you so much, Kimberly and Mary Beth and Cindy, for the work you've done. It's just so very important.
Hello, this is Umi. May I ask you a question?
Oh, please do, Umi.
Hi, this is. Thank you so much for putting this up. And I would like to ask you two questions. And one is about the kinds of nuclei that we're trying to regulate with this petition. And I've already spoken with the Kim, so I understand that cesium-134 and 137 are, our starting point. But are you thinking about including other nuclei? That's the first question. And the second question is what is the time frame that you're looking at about this petition and, our struggle around this? I don't know. I've never really dealt with that, so I would like to know your ideas. Thank you.
Thanks, Umi. You want to go ahead, Cindy?
Sure. I'll first address the other nuclide issue. So, yes, Umi, we chose cesium because it not only is one of the easier ones to measure, because it gives off the kind of radiation that can be more easily measured, but we also chose it because often it is what they call, and if you look at the IPPNW report that I mentioned earlier, it's what they call an indicator nuclide. Mm-hmm. So often when cesium is expelled, depending on the circumstances, whether it's an accident or a routine release, there will be other nuclides associated with it. So if you've got a ratio, so if you've got a certain amount of cesium that comes out, you've got a certain amount of strontium and a certain amount of plutonium, etc. Now, that is different for every reactor core, and therefore it's different for every reactor accident or routine release. So Chernobyl had a certain ratio of cesium to strontium to plutonium, etc., to iodine. And Fukushima had a certain ratio that was different from the ratio at Chernobyl. And then, in addition to the different ratios between the cores of the reactors, you also have the question of where they each travel in the environment and how they travel in the environment. cesium is one of the ones that can travel the farthest. So one of the things that we are asking for in the FDA petition is that every once in a while a piece of food goes not just through the sort of assembly line gamma counter that would look at the cesiums, but also that it be pulled aside every once in a while and go through a process called scintillation counting, which would pulp the food. You'd have to mash, say, an apple, or you'd have to ash the food, turn it into ash, and then you could measure for more radionuclides. So every once in a while, we would ask that some food be pulled aside, and we could decide, how often that would happen to get some sort of an indication of maybe what the ratios might be, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, so we have thought about that, but in order to do that you can't do that with every piece of food, or we'd be eating applesauce all the time, which I'm sure you know. So we have thought about that. I hope that clears up a little more.
Yes, it did. I just wanted to know about the the planning in terms of this petition. I was with the Citizens Radiation Monitoring Stations in Japan, so I was curious how you look at to proceed a petition. So thank you for clarifying so much.
Sure. And then your second question, I think, was the timeline. I think you might be asking how long it takes to work through maybe the bureaucracy of the FDA, and how soon things might happen. It could take months to get what we're asking for, if then. So that's kind of why we want to sort of try and do a parallel thing where we're trying to get appropriate and compatible technologies in sort of a network in this country, so that we're trying to do more than just the FDA petition, but doing the other thing of trying to network with people and that kind of thing, and having independent monitoring and testing is going to require much more research on our part, and it's not something that we it had to have been done yesterday, absolutely, but at the same time, you want to get it right. You don't want to be going in half-cocked, and so it's going to take time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cindy.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Kathy Iwane, and I just have a real quick question. Thank you so much for holding this. I think there was a speaker 5 minutes back who mentioned that this really needs to be brought to the state of a national emergency, because it's a very slow process, and in order to create awareness. But my question is, I guess what I'd like to, based on your last statement that we're searching for technologies, and knowing that if we do even become recognized through this process with these petitions, with the EPA, with the FDA, in the meantime, because we know it will take several months, is there any consensus among the experts, and by extension among our group working so hard, as to a recommendation for scintillator? Well, I don't trust my Geiger counter. Let's face it, it only measures cesium 134, 137, strontium 90. People aren't aware of how to calibrate them, et cetera, et cetera. My main question is, can you make any recommendation here now for consumers and citizens to sort of get their feet wet as it stands now?
For what kind of monitoring? Food?
I'm sorry, a scintillator and or a very high-tech Geiger. I have been, in order to start looking at our food and create that protocol. I know that we've been in conference before, and I know this has come up, and I'm sorry if this was discussed at the last conference. I wasn't available to attend that one. But I just think for all of us, because we do know the importance of this, what can I do today? Of course, these statements, signing the petitions, it's all very important. It's important to go and speak to your neighbors publicly, etc. But to actually take action, knowing that most of us do have children or are even planning on having children, to take the action in measuring our food and monitoring our own food Do you have a suggestion or consensus on that?
Well, I will tell you what I know, and that's all I can do. I will not recommend.
Okay.
I know that the kind of detectors that we would have to be using for the 5 becquerel project through FDA that would give that kind of measurement would be a germanium detector. That's the name of it. And to my knowledge, the only company that makes it is a company out of Europe called Canberra, and they are a subsidiary of the nuclear company Areva.
Oh, great.
Right. So this is why I'm so reluctant to, because we're really researching. we're trying to research alternatives, and it's been difficult.
Right.
And maybe it measures properly, but I tell you, after I heard Arne Gundersen, who most of you will probably know, he was a nuclear engineer. He now works at Fairwinds in Vermont. After he told us at the symposium, announced it publicly, that he was there with a gentleman who was trying to sell Geiger counters to the Japanese government, and this gentleman's Geiger counters, I don't know who it was because he didn't say, but his Geiger counters were finding much higher levels of radiation than the Geiger counters that the Japanese government was using. And so that makes me really wonder if any of the measurements that are being taken in Japan right now are actually correct. And that really shook my faith in what is supposed to be, an unalterable direct measurement of radioactivity. And so it was kind of a crisis for me, logically, because I want to be able to rely on something. Okay, you have to trust something. And if you can't trust your instrument, then there's very little to do, okay, which is why I'm so,
Cindy, would you please talk about the issue of calibration? I know Kathy brought that up, but just in case, does everyone else understand about the issue of calibration? And if not, I'd like you to speak about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there are different ways to calibrate instruments. And I'd have to know, you get certain counts from certain sources. So a lot of instruments have to be calibrated using a radioactive source. This is my understanding. I've never actually calibrated an instrument myself. But you have to calibrate a source. You have to calibrate using a radioactive source. So your instrument would have to register off that source, and it would have to equate that source with the way that it's going to measure any future radioactivity that it encounters. And that's what you don't necessarily, not only is the company that you're purchasing it from, it's kind of a black box, right, where you can't really see the formulas that are going on, but you also have to be very careful once you have the instrument to calibrate it yourself. So there are several things that have to be done. It's very particular, and it's you have to be very, very careful. And there are several pitfalls. So again, I don't know if that clarifies.
I have gotten, this is Mary Beth, and I just remember a story from NEARS where Diane DeGrigo had rented a machine that they had so much trouble with, and they are so knowledgeable, and they had to have it. They finally discovered that it wasn't calibrated correctly, and
she sent it back. That was at Berkeley, I believe.
Yeah. So
that was a Berkeley machine.
This is why we want to do a lot of good research and eventually put together a white paper or a packet of information so that people can they don't have to reinvent the wheel as far as finding out all these details about food, measuring scintillators, and what the price will be and what the calibration has to be, and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, yeah, and with something as tricky as calibration, if it's open to any sort of fudging at all, to my mind, you don't want that instrument coming from nuclear industry proponents. That's part of the problem. Right.
So we're trying to find a place and a person who might be willing to engineer one for citizens' use. And
we have a good lead on that person too.
Right. So we're hoping to do that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Mhm. Any other questions?
Well, this is Kim Roberson. I'd like to speak to the great comment that has been made about how this needs to be raised to emergency status, and I couldn't agree more. All of us, I believe, here are agreeing with that. And for my part, I wrote a small book. Many of you know this. It's Silence Deafening, Fukushima Fallout, A Mother's Response. I wrote it over a year ago. It started as an essay. It grew to an ebook and then a print book, and it's been out on all of the EPUB formats, and it's available in print. And I used that as a platform to get on radio interviews. And I've had one TV interview, and I have another one in the pipeline. In order to kind of break into the mainstream with this book, which is really intended to kind of ease newcomers into the situation of new parents and just people in general who don't know about the issue. I have been using it as a platform, but I've been having to spend quite a bit of money to purchase advertising in order for the producers to find out that the book exists. And to date, I've done with about 13 or 14 interviews. They're split up between the silencedeafening.com website and the FFAN.us website. And there are more that still need to be put up. Cindy has been with me on one or two of the interviews. Mary Beth has helped. Diane DiRigo. It's been well received. And all of it takes time. I plan on going back to the producers who have interviewed to see if they know other producers and, so on. So what I'm still doing is raising money to that effort, because when people hear about this on the radio or they see it on TV, then it becomes much more real to them. And that's the mission here. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about this towards the end of the call, which is coming up pretty soon. But I'm very aware that we need to be doing everything that we can right now to elevate this in the public consciousness. About 2 years ago, I got on the local news in the Bay Area when a group of us, including Mary Beth, went to the Japanese consulate in San Francisco to protest the incineration of the tsunami earthquake rubble debris. And we got a small spot on 2 stations, and I was able to actually get on the air and say radioactive cesium is in our food supply. But, so much more of this has to happen, and that's why it's been really great to do the radio interviews. But it's hard to break in to the mainstream media. It's very difficult. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about that in terms of our plans for fundraising. But that's one way that we're doing this. I know Cindy recently did a TV show after she spoke at the Helen Caldecott Symposium. And we're chipping away at it the best that we can. We're definitely pushing a boulder up a hill right now, but we're getting there.
Is there another question?
Yes, there is, but I'm afraid we're stepping on each other. I'll let someone else who hasn't spoken yet go first, but I wanted to squeeze in one more question.
I don't think there are any other burning questions, so please go ahead.
Okay, this is Diane Messer in Maine. I was the one who mentioned elevating this to a national emergency status. I have a little bit of experience in this area. I spent quite a long time, 22 years in the military. I was trained as a nuclear decon team leader, and I know that if you're going to do accurate, it's a couple of things, and I won't try to bog this down too long, but if you're going to be doing accurate calibration of this equipment, you're not going to be able to do it yourself. Your credibility will be harmed. You have to have a certified, registered facility doing this that there's some certifications that they have that will make their credibility above reproach, and I think you need that involved. And if you're going to elevate this to a national emergency status, you need to do some benchline testing quickly with certified calibrated equipment, and you need to have the findings presented through I don't know what the mechanism would be, but you don't just have a conference. You have to appeal through a normal procedure, and I'm not really sure how you would get this particular issue brought to a national emergency. You might ask people like Helen Caldecott or Arnie Gunderson, and they might have some good ideas that'll keep us from having to headache and agonize over this and trying to figure it out.
So
Diane,
this is Cindy,
before we end the call, Diane, I would love to have your contact information so we could keep in touch, for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty often on the CAN Facebook page, and if you're also on Facebook, we could do friending and we could have private conversations, even if necessary, on Facebook.
Great. What's your last name, please?
Messer, I'll spell that, M as in Mary, E-S-S-E-R.
Great. Thank you.
We're also planning on having another follow-up call to this, just so you know. But Mary Beth, do you think it might be okay now to go into the next
Yeah, I think
here?
it's perfect timing. Kimberly, go ahead.
Okey-doke. Well, I'll try to make this brief. This is Kim Roberson, and I'm happy to announce that Fukushima Fallout Awareness Network is becoming a fiscally sponsored nonprofit project, and this sets us on a course to become a 501c3 nonprofit organization in the future. And we just realized that there's so much work to be done, and we can't do it on our own. We need to enlist the help of others. And the timing is definitely ripe for that. And the two ways that we've talked about to do this is to ask people to volunteer time and also financial support. And once we are completely set up with Fukushima Fallout Awareness Network as this nonprofit project, which should be in about a week or two, we will be accepting donations on the Fukushima Fallout Awareness Network website. We'll have a special donation button up. What we're doing right now is, and what I mentioned earlier, to continue to spread awareness on this issue. We realize this is really central to elevating this issue in the public's consciousness. So the more that we can be in the media doing this, the better. So until we get the other system set up, I'm continuing to promote my book, Silence Deafening, Fukushima Fallout: A Mother's Response. This project started last summer. It began with an Indiegogo fundraiser, which allowed me to buy airtime. And well, actually, what you do is you buy advertising time. Advertisers, for instance, there was this one radio TV interview reporter that I spent considerable money and time focused on in order to get some national media. So that the funding is gone for that now. And basically, I've been operating on a very not even a non-existent budget, I should say. So I just wanted to encourage people to please continue to support the work of the Silence Deafening Project. And how to do this is just to go to silencedeafening.com and click on the donation button. And there's a short video. I have a fiscal sponsor. It's Fractured Atlas. They've been around for a long time. They're very reputable. And there's also a button on the Fukushima Fallout Awareness Network website to donate through the Silence Deafening campaign. So this is our media branch right now of what we're trying to do. And we're kind of stalling right now because I've run out of funding. And once we get this other component in place completely with Fukushima Fallout Awareness Network as the fiscally sponsored project, we will be able to write grants and kind of elevate our fundraising to the next level. But we need help with that as well. So I just really want to, appeal to people to make a donation today of any amount on those websites through the donation tab. There are some pretty cool perks that you can get in return, copies of the book or other things at different levels. It's kind of modeled still on the Indiegogo fundraising system. So anyway, it's also a great way to raise awareness because when people buy this book and they read it, it's about 100 pages. It's a quick read, and I have been told that it definitely helps to awaken people to the problem that we have right now. So sharing it as a gift, what have you, it's a great way to help support the work that we're doing right now. And we wanted to have this first call in place just to get a sense of everyone's input and opinions, and I think it's gone really well. We want to have another one in the future, and it feels like this is a true grassroots movement in every sense of the word. And in this phase of the process, we definitely need to keep the FDA petition alive. FDA could decide that they don't want to make this an official petition, but we want to make it extremely difficult for them to think that way. So the more national groups that we can get on board, the better. I've been talking to clergy groups. We have the approval of the National Organic Consumers Association. They're in their process of putting up their comments. Educator groups, early childhood education groups in particular I've been talking to. The more that everyone can start focusing on getting these national groups to sign on to that FDA petition, the better off we'll be. And the other part of it is that we really need people to work with us. It's been kind of a small group now for almost 2 years. Very dedicated, very focused, but we're ready now to expand, especially in light of the fact that we're on our way to becoming a nonprofit, which is amazing to me. I'm so happy about that. And just to give you an idea of some of the things that we need help with our websites. People who understand how to add to websites, who have the time, who would like to help us be a little creative with it, to better place our websites on Google. We need help with that. We need help with grant writing and fundraising. We need help on our Facebook page, just to helping administer the page. I can't get to it every single day. I feel like it needs more attention than it gets. We need help with graphic design work. For instance, that flyer that a lot of you saw today, a woman named Sandy was kind enough to donate her time to help me create that flyer. I wouldn't have been able to do it on my own. So that ordinarily would have cost quite a bit of money. Other work that we've had has cost money, and honestly, to tell you the truth, it's come out of my pocket, which can only happen for so much longer. My husband has been very supportive up to a certain point, but he really wants to see this become more supported by others as well, and I can't disagree with him on that. We need help with outreach. We need help with database building and management. I think we have a great thing here. We need to be focusing on reaching out to other organizations and to stores and to companies who would be sympathetic to what we're doing and maybe even unsympathetic, and we need to start keeping track of who they are and how we can best use that information going forward. So please, anyone, if you have talents that you would like to donate, your time, your money, we really need you to help us in order to take this on to the next phase. And if I have any questions on that, please let me know.
This is Lori Hedrick with San Clemente Green. I just wanted to thank all you guys for putting this together and great information for everyone. We're definitely supportive of what you're doing, and we'll at least start with donating some money and see what we can do to spread the word and get others involved as well. So we're actually at another event where we're supposed to speak, and it's about time for us to be up there. But I just wanted to let you know that we're very supportive, and thank you for all you're doing.
That's like music to our ears. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Bye, Lori. Is there anybody else that would like to make a closing comment or volunteer?
Actually, before we hang up today, I would love to take, any kind of feedback on what I was just proposing, and anyone who wants me to follow up with a phone call this week, I'll be happy to. We're serious. We really need to get started on expanding what we're working on, and it could be just a few minutes of your week. It could be a few hours. It could be whatever you want it to be. But we have such a great group of people listening on this call right now that I'm just really hopeful that you'll want to continue in supporting what we're doing and help us grow. We're at a point right now where if we don't get this extra support, we're going to stay kind of inert. I don't see that we're going to be able to move forward until we get other people to help us. So if anyone has any input right now, please, here's the time.
This is Erica Gray from Virginia. I just wanted to say thank you so much for you ladies, all the work that you're doing, and I'm very supportive. I'll definitely continue to share the information and see what I can do on on my end. I've got a sick little boy that I need to go and attend to, but I just wanted to say thank you very much, and thanks for the information, and I'm sure we'll stay in touch.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you so much.
All right, y'all take care.
This is Laura Lynch in Santa Barbara. I want to thank you again, and I'd like to say that you definitely have my support, and you have had all along. Not money-wise, unfortunately. I'm not able to do that, but I am able to help you with the Facebook administering and graphics and, data entry, whatever. I can donate my time.
Awesome. Laura,
wonderful. Yippee.
Yeah, that's great. We need that.
And then I
that
also
just boosted our spirits.
So I can help on Twitter as well.
Oh,
great.
Good. I'm on there constantly, as well as Facebook, so why not,
Okay. Fabulous. Well, we'll be following up with you for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for being with us and caring about this important issue. And we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.